The ship was called Starward Hope, and it carried over 3,000 souls through the black emptiness of space. Park Yuna had lived on this ship for 2 years now, and she thought she had seen every kind of creature the galaxy had to offer. She was wrong. Yuna was a Valari, a species known for their tall, thin bodies and pale blue skin. Her people could sense emotions the way others could smell flowers or taste food. It was both a gift and a burden. She worked as a medical officer on the ship, treating wounds and sickness for dozens of different species every day. She was good at her job. She was also very curious. The humans had joined the Galactic Coalition only 15 years ago. They were considered young, primitive, and not very important. Most species ignored them. Some looked down on them. Yuna found them fascinating. There was one human on her deck. His name was Kim Do-yoon, and he worked as an engineer. He was responsible for keeping the life support systems running, fixing broken pipes, and making sure nobody froze to death or ran out of air. It was important work, but nobody thanked him for it. Do-hyun was quiet. He came to work, did his job, and went back to his room. He never joined the other crew members for meals. He never attended social gatherings. He never smiled. The other aliens on the ship said this was normal for humans. They said humans were cold creatures who did not feel emotions like other species did. Yuna knew they were wrong. Every time Do-hyun walked past her in the corridor, she felt something radiating from him. It was not coldness, it was pain. Deep, heavy, constant pain that sat on his shoulders like a weight. She also felt exhaustion so strong it made her own body tired just being near him. She watched him carefully over the following weeks. She noticed that he often skipped meals. She noticed that the dark circles under his eyes grew darker every day. She noticed that he sometimes leaned against walls when he thought nobody was looking, as if standing up was too hard. But he never complained. He never asked for help. He just kept working. One day, there was an accident on Deck 7. A coolant pipe burst and flooded 3 crew quarters with freezing liquid. The affected crew members had to be moved to temporary housing while the damage was repaired. It was a big job, and it needed to be done fast. Do-hyun volunteered to lead the repair team. Yuna watched him work. She watched him crawl through tight spaces filled with sharp metal and toxic fumes. She watched him carry heavy equipment that should have required 2 people to lift. She watched him work through his first shift, then his second shift, then his third shift without stopping. Other species could not do this. A Valari would have collapsed after 1 shift. A Torvan would have demanded rest after 2. But Do-hyun kept going. His hands were shaking. His face was pale. Sweat dripped down his forehead even though the corridor was cold. But he kept going. After 36 hours, the repairs were done. The crew members could return to their quarters. Everyone praised the engineering team for their fast work. Nobody mentioned Do-hyun specifically. Nobody seemed to notice that he had done most of the work himself. Yuna noticed. She was walking back to her own quarters when she saw him in the corridor. He was leaning against the wall, his eyes half closed. He looked like he might fall over at any moment. When he saw her, he straightened up and nodded politely. "Medical Officer Park," he said. His voice was rough and tired. "Engineer Kim," she replied. "You should go to the medical bay. You need rest and fluids." He shook his head. "I'm fine. Just need a few hours of sleep." He was not fine. Yuna could feel it. His body was screaming for rest, for food, for care. But his mind was pushing all of that down, ignoring it, refusing to acknowledge it. "You worked 36 hours without stopping," she said. "That is not healthy for any species." Do-hyun almost smiled. Almost. "Humans are tougher than we look." Then he walked away, moving slowly down the corridor toward his quarters. Yuna watched him go. She felt his pain with every step he took. She felt his loneliness like a cold wind. She had heard stories about humans, She had heard that they could survive injuries that would kill other species. She had heard that they could keep functioning through pain and exhaustion that would shut down any other body. She had thought these stories were exaggerations, myths created to make the young species seem more interesting. Now she was not so sure. That night, Yuna could not sleep. She lay in her bed and thought about Kim Do-hyun. She thought about the pain she felt from him. She thought about the way he pushed himself beyond all reasonable limits. She thought about the way nobody seemed to care. She made a decision. The next morning, she went to the supply room and gathered cleaning materials. She gathered fresh sheets and sanitizing sprays and organizational containers. Then she walked to Do-hyun's quarters and pressed the door chime. It took a long time for him to answer. When the door finally opened, he looked even worse than before. His hair was messy. His eyes were red. His uniform was still stained with grease and coolant from the repair work. "Medical Officer Park?" he said, confused. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," Yuna said firmly. "I am here to conduct a mandatory health inspection of your living quarters." This was not entirely true. There was no such thing as a mandatory health inspection. But Yuna was a medical officer, and she could make it sound official if she wanted to. Do-hyun stared at her for a moment. She could feel his suspicion, his discomfort, his desire to be left alone. But she could also feel something else underneath all of that, a tiny spark of something that might have been gratitude. "I don't think that's necessary," he said. "I think it is," Yuna replied. "May I come in?" He hesitated. Then he stepped aside and let her enter. The room was a mess. Clothes on the floor, empty food containers on the desk, tools and spare parts scattered everywhere. But it was not the mess that bothered Yuna. It was the emptiness. There were no personal items anywhere, no pictures, no decorations, no sign that anyone actually lived here. It looked like a storage room, not a home. "I know it's not clean," Do-hyun said. "I've been busy." "I can see that," Yuna said. She set down her supplies and turned to face him. "I am going to help you clean, and you are going to rest." "Those are not requests." He opened his mouth to argue. Then he closed it again. He was too tired to fight. "Fine," he said quietly, "but only because I don't have the energy to stop you." Yuna nodded and began to work. She did not know what she would find in this room. She did not know that her life was about to change forever. She only knew that this human needed help, and she was going to give it to him whether he liked it or not. That was who she was. That was what she did. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. Yuna worked quietly while Do-hyun sat on the edge of his cot and watched her. She could feel his discomfort. He was not used to people being in his space. He was not used to people helping him. It made him nervous, like an animal that had been hurt too many times. She started with the clothes on the floor. She folded them neatly and placed them in the storage compartment. Most of them were work uniforms, stained and worn. There were only a few casual clothes, and they were all plain and simple. No colors, no patterns, nothing that showed personality. Next, she collected the empty food containers. There were many of them: protein bars, nutrient paste, dried fruit packs. Quick food that could be eaten fast and forgotten. No real meals, no fresh food, nothing that required time or care to prepare. "Do you ever eat in the dining hall?" she asked. Do-hyun shook his head. "Too crowded, too loud." Yuna understood. Her empathic senses made crowded places difficult for her too. But she still made herself go sometimes. She knew that isolation was not good for the mind. "You should try going during off hours," she said. "It's quieter then." He did not respond. She did not push. She moved on to the desk, where tools and spare parts were scattered everywhere. She did not know what most of them were, so she simply organized them by size and placed them in a container. Do-hyun watched her without objecting. He was too tired to care about the arrangement of his tools. As she cleaned, she glanced at him from time to time. He was sitting very still, his hands resting on his knees. His eyes were half closed. She could feel exhaustion pulling at him like gravity, trying to drag him down into sleep. "You should lie down," she said. He shook his head. "I'll sleep when you're done." "That could take a while. You need rest now." He hesitated. She could feel his resistance, his stubborn pride, but she could also feel his body giving up, surrendering to its need for sleep. "Fine," he said finally, "but just for a few minutes." He lay down on the cot and pulled a thin blanket over himself. It was a standard ship blanket, gray and rough. Yuna noticed that there was no pillow, no extra covers, nothing to make the bed more comfortable. Within seconds, he was asleep. Yuna continued cleaning, moving carefully to avoid making noise. She sanitized the surfaces, organized the remaining items, and disposed of the trash. The room began to look better, but it still felt empty. It still felt like a place where someone existed, but did not live. She wondered about Do-hyun's life before this ship. She wondered if he had family somewhere, or friends, or a home he missed. She wondered what had brought him to the edge of the galaxy, working thankless jobs for species that looked down on him. She was about to finish when she noticed a pile of clothes near the cot. She walked over quietly to collect them, being careful not to wake Do-hyun. As she bent down to pick up a shirt, her arm brushed against the blanket. It shifted. The blanket moved just enough to reveal Do-hyun's back. His shirt had ridden up while he slept, exposing skin that should have been smooth and healthy. It was not. Yuna froze. Her hands stopped moving. Her breath caught in her throat. Do-hyun's back was covered in scars. Not small scars. Not accidents or minor injuries. These were deep, deliberate marks that crossed his skin in patterns that made her stomach turn. Some were old and faded. Some were newer, still pink and raised. There were burns that had healed badly. There were cuts that looked like they had been made with surgical tools. There were patches where the skin had a different texture, as if it had been removed and regrown. The scars continued down his sides and onto his arms. Everywhere she looked, there was damage. Layer upon layer of wounds that had healed but never disappeared. Yuna's empathic senses hit her like a wave. She felt echoes of pain so intense that her own body ached. She felt fear. She felt despair. She felt a desperate will to survive that had kept this man alive through horrors she could not imagine. Tears formed in her eyes. Her hand moved to cover her mouth. What had happened to him? Who had done this? Do-hyun's eyes opened. For a moment, they just looked at each other, Yuna standing there with tears on her face, Do-hyun lying on the cot, his scars exposed for her to see. Then he sat up slowly and pulled the blanket around himself, covering his back. His face was blank, but she could feel shame radiating from him, shame and anger and something that felt like resignation. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly. "What happened to you?" Yuna whispered. He did not answer immediately. He just sat there, holding the blanket tight, as if it could protect him from her questions. She could feel him building walls inside himself, trying to lock away the memories and emotions that her presence had disturbed. "It's not important," he said. "How can you say that?" Yuna's voice was shaking. "Those scars. Someone hurt you badly. Someone tortured you." The word hung in the air between them. Torture. It was an ugly word. A word that belonged to horror stories and history lessons, not to real people sitting in front of you. Do-hyun looked at the floor. It was a long time ago. How long? 3 years. 3 years. Yuna felt sick. 3 years ago, she had been attending medical conferences and complaining about the food in the dining hall. 3 years ago, this man had been suffering in ways she could not understand. "Who did this?" she asked. Another long silence. Then finally he spoke. "The Korath Dominion." Yuna's blood went cold. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Korath. They were slavers and conquerors who believed that other species existed only to serve them. They captured ships, took prisoners, and used them for labor, or worse. "You were a prisoner," she said. "Yes." "For how long?" 11 months. 11 months. Almost a year of captivity. Almost a year of pain. "What did they do to you?" Yuna asked. She was not sure she wanted to know, but she needed to understand. Do-yun finally looked up at her. His eyes were tired, but there was something hard in them, something that had been forged in fire and suffering. "They wanted to know about humans," he said. "We were new to the galaxy. They had never seen our species before, so they tested us." "Tested?" "They wanted to know how much we could take, how much pain, how much damage. They wanted to find our limits." He paused. "Turns out we don't have many." Yuna felt her legs go weak. She sat down on the edge of the desk, needing support. The Korath had experimented on him. They had treated him like an animal, cutting him open to see what was inside, and he had survived. "That's why you have so many scars," she said. "They kept hurting you, and you kept healing." "Human bodies are good at healing," Do-yun said. "We recover from injuries that would kill other species. That made us interesting to them. They wanted to see how far they could push us." His voice was flat, emotionless. "They pushed very far." Yuna thought about all the times she had seen him working through exhaustion. All the times she had felt pain radiating from him. All the times he had refused to rest, refused to stop, refused to admit weakness. He was not being stubborn. He was being what the Korath had made him, a survivor who did not know how to stop surviving. "You need help," she said. "Medical help, psychological support. The ship has resources." "No." His voice was sharp. "I'm functional. I can work." "That's all that matters." "That's not all that matters." "It is to me." They stared at each other across the small room. Yuna felt his determination, his pride, his fear of being seen as broken or weak. She also felt something else underneath it all. A small, quiet hope that someone might finally see him as more than just a tool. She made another decision. "I'm not going to leave you alone," she said. "I'm going to help you, whether you want it or not. That's not a request either." Do-yun looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she had met him, she felt something shift inside him. It was not trust, not yet. But it was the beginning of something. And sometimes, beginnings were enough. Yuna could not stop thinking about what she had seen. The scars, the pain, the flat, empty way Do-yun had described his torture, as if he was talking about the weather or a boring report. That night, she went to the ship's database and searched for information about humans. She had read some reports before, but she had never paid close attention. Humans were considered a minor species, unimportant in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Most of the information about them was basic and incomplete, but now she read everything she could find. Human biology was strange. Their bodies were soft and weak compared to most species. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. They were slow and fragile and died easily from things that other species would survive without problem. And yet, they were also incredibly hard to kill. Humans could survive massive blood loss. They could function with broken bones. They could keep moving even when their bodies were shutting down from pain and exhaustion. Their healing abilities were remarkable. Cuts and wounds that would take weeks to heal on other species could heal in days on a human. They could regrow skin and muscle and even small amounts of nerve tissue. But the most disturbing thing Yuna read was about their ability to adapt to pain. Most species had protective systems that would shut the body down when pain became too intense. It was a safety feature, designed to prevent further damage. Humans had this too, but it was weak. Their bodies could push through pain that would cause other species to pass out or go into shock. This made humans valuable to the Korath. Yuna found reports from Coalition intelligence about human prisoners who had been held by the Dominion. The reports were difficult to read. The Korath had treated humans like experimental subjects, testing the limits of their endurance. They had wanted to understand how humans could keep going when all logic said they should stop. Many humans had died in these experiments, but many had survived. And those survivors carried their experiences with them forever. Yuna closed the database and sat in the dark of her room. She understood now why Do-hyun acted the way he did. He had been trained by pain. He had learned that his value was in his ability to endure, to keep working, to never show weakness. The Korath had taught him that, and he had not unlearned it. But there was something else that bothered her, something that made her angry. Do-hyun had been on this ship for over a year. In that time, he had worked harder than anyone else. He had taken dangerous assignments. He had pushed himself beyond all reasonable limits, and nobody had noticed. Nobody had asked if he was okay. Nobody had looked at this man and seen that he was suffering. The galaxy saw humans as tools, durable, reliable, disposable tools that could be used up and thrown away. Yuna was not going to let that happen to Do-hyun. The next morning, she went to the medical bay and filed a formal report. She documented what she had seen, the scars, the signs of torture, the evidence of long-term physical and psychological damage. She flagged Do-hyun for mandatory psychological evaluation and requested that he be placed on medical leave. The ship's computer processed her report and sent it to the captain. Captain Vorath was a Torvan, a species known for their rigid discipline and military thinking. He was a good captain in many ways, but he was not known for his compassion. When he called Yuna to his office that afternoon, she knew the conversation would not be easy. "Medical Officer Park," he said, looking at her report on his screen. "You want me to put Engineer Kim on medical leave?" "Yes, Captain. Based on old scars and your personal assessment of his mental state. Based on evidence of severe trauma and clear signs of self-neglect," Yuna corrected. Vorath made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Engineer Kim is one of our most reliable crew members. His work record is excellent. He has never missed a shift, never filed a complaint, never caused any problems." "That is exactly the problem," Yuna said. "He never stops. He never rests. He pushes himself until he collapses, and then he pushes himself more. That is not healthy behavior for any species." "It's baseline human behavior," Vorath said. "I've read the reports. Humans have higher endurance than most species. They can work longer and recover faster. Engineer Kim is simply performing within normal human parameters." Yuna felt anger rising in her chest. "With respect, Captain, you are wrong. What Engineer Kim is doing is not normal. It's survival behavior learned through trauma. The Korath tortured him for almost a year. They taught him that his only value is in his ability to endure pain. And we are reinforcing that lesson every day by allowing him to destroy himself for our benefit." Vorath's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, medical officer. You are close to insubordination." "I am close to being the only person on this ship who cares about a member of our crew," Yuna replied. There was a long silence. Vorath stared at her, and she stared back. She knew she was taking a risk. She knew she could face discipline for speaking to the captain this way, but she did not care. Finally, Vorath spoke again. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "I want you to grant Engineer Kim medical leave. I want you to require him to attend psychological counseling, and I want you to issue a formal advisory to all department heads about human crew members." She paused. "Humans are not tools. They are people, and we need to start treating them that way." Vorath leaned back in his chair. "That's a significant request, medical officer. I don't have the authority to issue coalition-wide advisories." "Then send it up the chain. Let the Coalition Council decide." Another silence. Yuna could not read Torvan emotions the way she could read other species, but she thought she saw something shifting in the captain's eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe consideration. "I will review your report," he said finally, "and I will consider your recommendations. That is all I can promise." It was not enough, but it was something. Yuna left the captain's office and went to find Do-hyun. He was in the engine room working on a power coupling that did not need to be worked on. His hands were shaking slightly. She could feel exhaustion coming off him in waves. "You need to stop," she said. He did not look up. "I'm almost done." "You're never done. You always find something else to fix, something else to do. You work until you can't stand, and then you work some more." She stepped closer. "I filed a report about you." "I requested medical leave." Now he looked up. His eyes were hard. "You had no right to do that." "I had every right. I'm a medical officer. It's my job to identify crew members who are a danger to themselves." "I'm not a danger to myself. You're the biggest danger to yourself on this entire ship." They stared at each other. Yuna could feel his anger, but she could also feel something else underneath it. Fear. He was afraid of what would happen if he stopped working. He was afraid of what he would feel if he was not constantly distracting himself. "I know what they did to you," she said softly. "I know you learned to survive by never stopping, never resting, never showing weakness. But you're not their prisoner anymore. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to earn your right to exist." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain. Old, deep pain that never went away. "You don't understand," he said. His voice was quiet now. "When I stop, I remember. When I rest, I feel it all again. The only way I know how to live is to keep moving." Yuna felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back. "Then let me help you find a new way," she said. "Please." He looked at her for a long moment. She could feel him standing at a crossroads inside himself. One path led back to the endless work, the constant pain, the slow destruction of his body and mind. The other path led somewhere unknown, somewhere that required trust and vulnerability and hope. He was afraid of both paths, but he was more afraid of the first one. "Okay," he said finally. "I don't know how, but okay." It was not much, just one word, but Yuna felt it like a door opening. Maybe they could not undo what the Korath had done to him. Maybe the scars would never fade, but maybe, just maybe, they could build something new on top of the ruins. It would take time. It would take patience. It would take more strength than Yuna knew she had. But she was willing to try. And for the first time, so was he. The senior staff meeting was held in the main conference room, a large space with windows that looked out into space. Yuna had never attended one of these meetings before. Medical officers were usually not invited unless there was a health emergency. Today was different. Captain Vorath had reviewed her report. He had consulted with the ship's counselor and the head of engineering. He had pulled Do-hyun's work records and medical history, and then he had called this meeting. Yuna sat at the end of the long table, feeling nervous and out of place. Around her were the most senior officers on the ship, the head of security, a massive creature with 4 arms and armored skin, the chief science officer, a small being with large eyes and delicate hands, the head of operations, a tall female with silver hair and a stern face, and Captain Vorath at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "We are here to discuss a report filed by Medical Officer Park," the captain said. "The report concerns Engineer Kim Do-hyun, a human crew member assigned to Deck 7. Medical Officer Park has requested that we place Engineer Kim on mandatory medical leave and require him to attend psychological counseling." The head of engineering, a gruff older male with scales and a deep voice, spoke first. Engineer Kim is one of my best workers. His performance reviews are excellent. I see no reason to remove him from duty. His performance is excellent because he works himself to the point of collapse, Yuna said. That is not sustainable. That is not healthy. Humans have higher endurance than other species, the engineering chief replied. It's a known biological fact. Engineer Kim is simply making use of his natural abilities. His natural abilities were exploited by the Korath Dominion to torture him for almost a year, Yuna said. Her voice was harder now, sharper. They cut him open. They burned him. They broke his bones and watched him heal so they could break them again. And we are doing the exact same thing by treating him as a machine instead of a person. Silence fell over the room. Several officers looked uncomfortable. The head of security shifted in his seat. That's a serious accusation, he said. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Yuna stood up, unable to sit still anymore. I've read the coalition reports about human prisoners. The Korath treated them as experimental subjects. They wanted to understand human endurance, human healing, human pain tolerance, and they learned that humans can survive almost anything. She looked around the table. That's not a gift. That's a curse. Because it means humans can be hurt in ways that would kill any other species. And they'll keep going. They'll keep functioning. They'll keep working until there's nothing left of them. The science officer spoke, her voice soft and thoughtful. I have studied human biology as well. Medical Officer Park is correct. Human endurance is remarkable, but it comes at a cost. Their bodies can continue functioning long past the point where they should stop. This makes them vulnerable to severe damage that other species would avoid simply by shutting down. So what are you suggesting? The operations chief asked. That we treat humans differently than other crew members? Yes, Yuna said. Exactly that. We need to recognize that human behavior patterns are not the same as other species. When a human says they're fine, they might not be. When a human keeps working through injury and exhaustion, it's not because they're dedicated, it's because their bodies don't know how to stop. She took a breath. Engineer Kim was tortured for 11 months. He watched other humans die. He was cut and burned and broken again and again, and when he was finally rescued, nobody helped him heal. Nobody taught him that he didn't have to keep surviving anymore. So he came here, and he kept doing the only thing he knew how to do. He kept enduring. He kept suffering. And we let him, because it was convenient for us. More silence. Yuna could feel the tension in the room. Some of the officers were defensive, unwilling to admit that they had failed a crew member. Others were thoughtful, considering her words. Captain Vorath spoke at last. Medical Officer Park, you have made your case, but I must consider the needs of the entire ship. We cannot simply remove a skilled engineer from duty based on your assessment alone. Then bring in an outside evaluator, Yuna said. Contact the Coalition Medical Authority. Let them review Engineer Kim's case. Let them decide if my assessment is correct. The captain considered this. That would take time, and it would create a tension that some crew members might not want. Engineer Kim does not want attention. He wants to be left alone to destroy himself in peace. Yuna's voice was firm. But wanting something does not make it right. Sometimes people need to be saved from themselves. The security chief made a low, rumbling sound that might have been agreement. I've seen this before. Soldiers who survive terrible things and don't know how to live anymore. They keep fighting even when the war is over. If what Medical Officer Park says is true, then Engineer Kim needs help. Real help, not just time off. Others began to speak. The science officer supported Yuna's position. The operations chief raised concerns about setting precedent. The engineering chief remained resistant, worried about losing a valuable worker. But something had shifted in the room. The conversation was no longer about whether Do-hyun needed help. It was about how to help him. Finally, Captain Vorath raised his hand for silence. I have made my decision, he said. Engineer Kim will be placed on medical leave for a minimum of 30 days. He will be required to attend counseling sessions with our ship's psychological specialist. His case will be forwarded to the Coalition Medical Authority for review and recommendations. He looked at Yuna. Additionally, I will submit a formal advisory to Coalition Command regarding human crew members. I will recommend that all ships develop protocols for monitoring human psychological welfare and preventing the exploitation of human endurance. Yuna felt her heart lift. It was more than she had hoped for. It was more than she had expected. Thank you, Captain, she said. Do not thank me yet, Vorath replied. This will create complications. Not everyone will agree with these measures, and Engineer Kim himself may resist. He will resist, Yuna agreed. But that's because he doesn't know any other way to be. We have to show him that there's another option. The meeting ended. Officers filed out of the room, some nodding to Yuna as they passed, others avoiding her eyes. She remained standing by the window, looking out at the stars. She had done it. She had spoken up for Do-hyun. She had forced the ship's leadership to recognize what was happening. She had started something that could change the way the entire coalition treated humans. But it was not enough. Rules and protocols would not heal Do-hyun's scars. Advisories would not undo years of trauma. The real work was still ahead. She had to help him learn how to live again. That evening, she went to his quarters. He opened the door looking tired and confused. She could feel his anxiety, his fear of what she was going to say. You got me put on leave, he said. It was not a question. Yes. I don't want leave. I want to work. I know. Yuna stepped inside and he let her. But working is not living, and you deserve to live, not just survive. He stood there in the small room, his arms crossed over his chest. Defensive, afraid, but also, underneath it all, hopeful. She could feel that small spark still burning. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. I don't know how to just exist without having something to do. Then we'll figure it out together, Yuna said. One day at a time. 1 hour at a time if we need to. He looked at her for a long moment. She could feel him searching for something in her eyes. Trust, sincerity, a reason to believe that this was not just another form of torture. Whatever he was looking for, he seemed to find it. Okay, he said again. That same small word, that same door opening. Yuna smiled. Okay. It was not a victory. Not yet, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were the hardest part. Everything after that would be one step at a time. The first few days were the hardest. Do-hyun did not know what to do with himself. He had spent years defining his life by work, by tasks, by problems that needed to be solved. Without those things, he felt empty and lost. He paced his small room like a caged animal, unable to sit still, unable to rest. Yuna came to see him every day. She brought food and made him eat it. She brought games and puzzles and books, anything to give his mind something to focus on. She sat with him and talked about nothing important, just letting him get used to her presence. He resisted at first. He was polite but distant, answering her questions with short words and avoiding her eyes. She could feel him building walls around himself, trying to push her away without being rude. She did not push back. She just kept coming. On the 4th day, he finally broke. She arrived to find him sitting on his cot, his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. She could feel pain coming off him in waves, old pain that he had kept locked away for years. I can't do this, he said. His voice was rough and broken. I can't just sit here. When I stop, I remember. I remember everything. Yuna sat down next to him. She did not touch him. She had learned that he did not like unexpected touch. But she sat close enough that he could feel her presence. What do you remember? She asked quietly. He did not answer for a long time. Then, slowly, he began to talk. He told her about the day he was captured. He had been on a small transport ship traveling to a new assignment. The Korath had attacked without warning. Most of the crew was killed. Do-hyun and 3 others were taken prisoner. He told her about the holding cells, dark and cold. He told her about the experiments, endless and cruel. The Korath scientists had been curious about humans. They had wanted to know everything. How much blood could a human lose before dying? How many bones could be broken before the body stopped functioning? How much pain could a human feel before the mind gave up? Do-hyun had learned the answers to all of those questions. He told her about watching the other prisoners die, one by one. He told her about the day he realized he might be the last human left in that facility. He told her about the morning he woke up and decided he would not break. He would not give them the satisfaction. He would survive out of pure spite. And he had survived. 11 months of torture, and he had survived. But survival had a cost. "I don't know how to be anything else," he said. "I don't know how to be a person anymore. I only know how to be a thing that endures." Yuna felt tears on her face. She let them fall. "You are not a thing," she said. "You are a person. A brave, strong, wounded person who has been through something terrible. And you deserve to heal." He looked at her. His eyes were red and wet. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to know. You just have to try." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "I'll try." After that day, something changed. Do-hyun was still guarded, still afraid. But he began to let Yuna in, little by little. He began to talk about his life before the Korath, his childhood on Earth, his family. The sister he had not spoken to in years because he did not know what to say. He talked about the things he had loved. Music, cooking, walking in the rain. Simple pleasures that he had forgotten how to enjoy. Yuna listened to everything. She asked questions. She shared stories from her own life, her own struggles and fears. She let him see that she was not perfect either. That everyone carried wounds of some kind. Slowly, day by day, Do-hyun began to change. He started eating regular meals. He started sleeping more than a few hours at a time. He started leaving his room, walking through the ship, letting himself be seen by other crew members. He attended his counseling sessions. He talked about the things he had never told anyone. It was hard and painful, and sometimes he came back to his room and did not want to speak for hours. But he kept going. 2 weeks into his leave, he asked Yuna if she would take him to the observation deck. He said he had not looked at the stars in a long time, not really looked at them. They went together, in the evening when the deck was empty. They sat by the large window and watched the universe drift past, stars and nebulae and distant galaxies, endless and beautiful. "It's strange," Do-hyun said quietly. "When I was their prisoner, I used to dream about space. I used to imagine floating out there free and weightless. It was the only thing that kept me going sometimes." "And now?" Yuna asked. He considered the question. "Now I'm actually here. And I almost missed it. I was so busy trying to survive that I forgot to live." Yuna smiled. "You're living now." "I'm trying." He looked at her. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I'm not going to give up on you," she said. "Ever." He held her gaze for a moment. Then, for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. A real smile, small and hesitant, but genuine. She felt warmth spread through her chest. Hope. Not just for him, but for both of them. The days continued to pass. Do-hyun's leave ended and he returned to work. But things were different now. He worked normal shifts instead of endless ones. He took breaks. He ate meals in the dining hall during off hours, just as Yuna had suggested. Other crew members began to notice him. They said hello in the corridors. They invited him to social events. He did not always accept, but sometimes he did. Little by little, he began to build connections. The Coalition Medical Authority reviewed his case and issued their recommendations. They agreed with Yuna's assessment. They recommended that all ships implement protocols for monitoring human welfare. They called for training programs to help other species understand human psychology. It was a small change in a big galaxy, but it was a start. One evening, near the end of Do-hyun's third month on the ship after his leave, he and Yuna sat together on the observation deck again. It had become their place. Whenever things were hard, whenever the memories got too heavy, they came here and watched the stars. "Can I ask you something?" Do-hyun said. "Of course." "Why did you help me? Really? You didn't know me. You had no reason to care what happened to me." Yuna thought about the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times. "Because I could feel your pain," she said finally, "and because I could see that no one else was going to help you, and because I believe that people are worth caring about, even when they don't believe it themselves." Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm glad you found me." "I'm glad I found you too." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars drift by. Yuna thought about everything that had happened, the scars she had seen, the pain she had felt, the long, slow process of healing that was still ongoing and might never be complete. But that was okay. Healing was not about being fixed. It was about learning to live with the broken parts. Do-hyun was still scarred. He would always be scarred. But he was also alive. He was present. He was trying. And that, Yuna thought, was the most human thing of all. Not the endurance, not the resilience, not the ability to survive anything the universe threw at you. The most human thing was the choice to keep going anyway, to find meaning in the pain, to reach out to others even when it was terrifying, to hope even when hope seemed foolish. The galaxy had looked at humans and seen tools. They had seen durability and endurance and pain tolerance. Yuna looked at Do-hyun and saw something else. She saw courage. She saw heart. She saw a person who had every reason to give up and had chosen not to. Humanity, she thought. What a strange and wonderful species. Maybe the galaxy could learn something from them after all. She reached out and took Do-hyun's hand. He looked at her, surprised, but he did not pull away. They sat there together, holding hands, watching the stars. And for the first time in a very long time, Do-hyun felt like he was home.